What would you do if your own son called you dead weight and demanded you find somewhere else to live? Would you defend yourself? Would you pack your bags quietly? Would you find a way to show them exactly what dead weight really looks like? Well, when Kevin said he couldn't afford to support me anymore, I decided to show him what his life would look like without my support. My name is Betty, and I'm 61 years old. This is the story of how my son's cruel words about me being a financial burden led to the most expensive lesson about gratitude and assumption he would ever receive. It's a story about family, sacrifice, and what happens when people mistake generosity for dependence and support for weakness. The relationship between my son Kevin and me had been deteriorating for months, though I hadn't fully understood why, until the devastating conversation that changed everything between us. Kevin was 33 years old, married to Sarah, and they had been living in what they believed was their dream home for the past 2 years. The house was a beautiful 3-bedroom colonial in one of the better neighborhoods in town, with a large backyard, updated kitchen, and the kind of curb appeal that made it clear this was a successful family's home. Kevin worked as a regional sales manager for a medical equipment company, and Sarah was a part-time graphic designer who worked from home while managing their household. From the outside, Kevin and Sarah appeared to be thriving young professionals who had achieved the American dream of homeownership and financial independence. They drove nice cars, took annual vacations, and lived the comfortable middle-class lifestyle that Kevin had always aspired to achieve. But what Kevin and Sarah didn't know, what I had never told them, was that their comfortable lifestyle was only possible because I had been secretly subsidizing their mortgage payments for the past 24 months. The arrangement had started innocently enough. 2 years earlier, Kevin had called me in a panic because he was 3 months behind on his mortgage payments and facing foreclosure. His company had cut his territory during a restructuring. His commission income had dropped by 40%, and Sarah's freelance work wasn't bringing in enough money to cover their shortfall. "Mom, we're going to lose the house," Kevin had told me during that desperate phone call. "Sarah doesn't know how bad things are, and I don't know what to do. We need $8,500 to catch up on the payments, and I don't have it." As any mother would do when her child was facing financial crisis, I had helped. I gave Kevin the $8,500 to bring his mortgage current, and I arranged to start making monthly payments of £200 to ensure that his family wouldn't face foreclosure while he rebuilt his income. But here's the crucial detail. Kevin and Sarah thought the help was temporary. They believed I had lent them money to catch up on their payments, and that they were making their own mortgage payments each month after that initial bailout. What they didn't know was that I had been making those monthly payments directly to their mortgage company for 24 consecutive months. Every month, $2,847 was automatically transferred from my retirement account to Kevin's mortgage servicer, keeping his family in their home while they remained completely unaware that their housing security depended entirely on my continued support. I had arranged a secret support system because I wanted Kevin to maintain his dignity as the provider for his family. I didn't want him to feel like a failure or a burden, and I didn't want Sarah to lose respect for her husband's ability to support their household. So I had created a system where they could believe they were self-sufficient while I quietly ensured their security. But what I hadn't anticipated was how that false sense of self-sufficiency would eventually turn into resentment toward me. Over the past 6 months, as Kevin's income had slowly recovered and their financial situation had stabilized, he and Sarah had begun to view my presence in their lives not as helpful, but as burdensome. They saw me as a financially struggling older woman who was dependent on their charity, rather than as the person who had been supporting them all along. The shift in their attitude had been gradual, but unmistakable. When I stayed for dinner, I noticed Kevin calculating the cost of the additional food. When I used their internet to check my email, Sarah made comments about utility bills. When I asked Kevin to help me with minor home repairs, he complained about the time and money it took away from his family responsibilities. They had begun treating me like a charity case who was taking advantage of their generosity, when the reality was exactly the opposite. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in March, when I was visiting Kevin in Sarah's house to celebrate their 2nd anniversary of homeownership. I had brought a bottle of wine and a card, congratulating them on 2 years of successful homeownership. though privately I was celebrating 2 years of successful secret support that had made their homeownership possible. During dinner, the conversation turned to their financial goals and future plans. Kevin was talking about wanting to start a college fund for the children they hope to have someday, and Sarah was discussing her dream of expanding her graphic design business. "The only thing holding us back," Kevin said, "is having to support Mom financially. Between helping her with her expenses and covering the extra costs when she's here, we're spending about $3,000 a month that we could be putting toward our own goals. $3,000 a month that they thought they were spending on me." The irony was staggering. They were complaining about spending money on me when I was spending nearly that exact amount every month to keep them in their house. But the conversation was about to get much worse. "Kevin's right," Sarah added. "Betty, we love having you around, but we need to think about our own financial future. We can't keep supporting you indefinitely." Supporting me. They thought they were supporting me when I was the one who had been supporting them for 2 years. "What exactly do you think you've been supporting?" I asked, genuinely curious about how they had calculated their supposed financial assistance to me. "Well, the extra groceries when you eat here, the utilities when you stay overnight, the help we give you with your car payments and medical bills," Kevin said. "It all adds up. Car payments and medical bills." I had never asked Kevin for help with either of those things, because I didn't need help. My car was paid off and my medical insurance was excellent. But somehow, Kevin had convinced himself that he was financially supporting me. "And frankly, Mom," Kevin continued, "we need to talk about making some changes. Sarah and I have been discussing it, and we think you need to find a more independent living situation that doesn't require so much financial support from us." More independent living. They wanted me to become more financially independent, when I was already the one providing their financial independence. "What kind of changes are you thinking about?" I asked. "Well, maybe you could look into senior housing or assisted living, something where your costs are more predictable and you don't have to rely on us so much." Senior housing. At 61 years old, they wanted me to move to senior housing because they thought I was financially dependent on them. But the most devastating blow was still coming. "The truth is, Mom," Kevin said, his voice taking on the tone people use when they're about to say something cruel but want to sound reasonable, "you've become dead weight that we can't afford to carry anymore." Dead weight. My son, the man I had given birth to, raised, supported through college, and secretly kept from losing his home for the past 2 years, had just called me dead weight. The words hit me like a physical blow, but they also sparked something else. The realization that Kevin needed to learn exactly what dead weight looked like, and exactly what he would lose when the real support system in his life was removed. "But wait until you see what I decided to do about it." The silence that followed Kevin's deadweight comment lasted only a few seconds, but in those seconds, made a decision that would change all of our lives forever. I was not going to defend myself. I was not going to explain how wrong he was about our financial relationship. I was not going to reveal the secret support I had been providing. Instead, I was going to let Kevin experience exactly what it felt like to carry actual dead weight, and then show him what it felt like to lose the support he didn't know he had. "You're absolutely right, Kevin," I said, my voice calm despite the storm building inside me. "I have been a financial burden on your family, and it's time for me to become more independent." Kevin and Sarah both looked surprised by my reasonable response. They had probably expected me to argue, to become emotional, or to plead for their continued support. My calm acceptance of their assessment threw them off balance. "Mom, we don't want to hurt your feelings," Sarah said, clearly relieved that I wasn't going to make this conversation more difficult than it already was. "We just think it would be better for everyone if you had your own place and your own financial responsibilities." "I completely understand," I replied. "In fact, I think you're right that I need to take a more active role in managing my own finances and stop depending on others for support." "Exactly," Kevin said, warming to the theme now that I wasn't resisting their plan. "It's really about independence and self-sufficiency. We want you to have the dignity of taking care of yourself, the dignity of taking care of myself, the man who hadn't made his own mortgage payment in 2 years was lecturing me about the dignity of self-sufficiency. "I appreciate your honesty," I said, "and I want you to know that I'm going to make some immediate changes to reduce the financial burden I've been placing on your family." "What kind of changes?" Sarah asked. "Well, starting immediately, I'm going to stop asking for any financial help from you. I'm going to take complete responsibility for all of my own expenses, and I'm going to make sure that I'm not costing you any money that you could be using for your own goals." "That's exactly what we were hoping to hear," Kevin said, clearly pleased that this conversation was going so much more smoothly than he had anticipated. "And," I continued, "I'm going to help you achieve your financial goals by removing all of the expenses associated with supporting me." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "I mean that I'm going to make sure that the $3,000 a month you've been spending on me becomes available for your college fund and Sarah's business expansion." Kevin was nodding enthusiastically. "Mom, that would be amazing. $3,000 a month would completely change our financial situation." "I'm sure it will," I said. "In fact, I think you're going to discover that my absence from your budget will have a much bigger impact than you expect." But what Kevin and Sarah didn't understand was that the $3,000 they thought they were spending on me was about to disappear in a very different way than they were expecting. That evening, after I left Kevin and Sarah's house, I made several phone calls that would begin Kevin's education about the difference between perceived financial burden and actual financial support. The first call was to Kevin's mortgage company, where I canceled the automatic payment arrangement that had been keeping his family in their home for the past 24 months. "Miss Williams," the customer service representative said, "are you sure you want to cancel this automatic payment? Your son's account is current, but only because of these monthly payments from your account." "I'm sure," I replied. "Effective immediately, Kevin will need to handle his own mortgage payments." "Should we notify him that the automatic payment from your account has been canceled?" "No, that won't be necessary. Kevin believes he's been making his own payments all along. He'll figure out the situation when his next payment is due." The second call was to my financial advisor, where I instructed him to transfer the $2,847 had been going to Kevin's mortgage into a separate account that I would use for my own independence and self-sufficiency. Exactly what Kevin had said he wanted me to achieve. "Betty," my advisor said, "are you sure about this decision? You've been helping Kevin for 2 years. What changed?" "What changed is that Kevin made it clear he considers me to be dead weight. That's draining his resources. I've decided to give him the opportunity to see what his financial situation looks like without my support, and what happens when he realizes he can't make his mortgage payments. Then Kevin will learn the difference between carrying dead weight and losing essential support." But the most important call was the one I made to prepare for the conversation that would happen when Kevin discovered the truth about his financial situation. I called my lawyer and asked him to prepare documentation showing every payment I had made on Kevin's behalf over the past 24 months. Bank statements, canceled checks, automatic payment confirmations, everything that would prove exactly who had been supporting whom in our family relationship. "Are you planning to use this documentation in some kind of legal proceeding?" my lawyer asked. "I'm planning to use it for educational purposes. My son is about to receive a very expensive lesson about gratitude and assumptions." 3 weeks later, that educational opportunity arrived exactly as I had predicted. But you haven't seen the most shocking part of what Kevin discovered when he tried to make his mortgage payment. The phone call came at 8:47 p.m. on a Thursday evening, exactly 26 days after Kevin had called me dead weight and demanded that I stop being a financial burden on his family. I was reading in my living room when the phone rang and Kevin's name appeared on the caller ID. "Mom," Kevin's voice was strained and confused when I answered. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Of course, sweetheart. What's troubling you?" "I just got off the phone with our mortgage company, and they told me something that doesn't make sense. They said that our account is 60 days past due, and that the automatic payments that had been keeping us current were canceled 3 weeks ago." "Oh my," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "That does sound concerning." "But Mom, the thing is, they said the automatic payments were coming from your account, not from ours. They said you'd been making our mortgage payments for the past 2 years. What did you tell them? I told them there must be some mistake, because we've been making our own payments. But they insisted that every payment for the past 24 months had come directly from your bank account. The moment of truth had arrived exactly as I had planned it. Kevin was about to learn that the financial independence he thought he had achieved was entirely dependent on the support from the woman he had called dead weight. Kevin, why don't you and Sarah come over to my house tonight? I think we need to have a conversation about your mortgage situation. Mom, please tell me this is some kind of bank error. Please tell me you haven't been paying our mortgage without us knowing about it. I'll explain everything when you get here. But Kevin, you might want to bring your financial records so we can compare notes about your monthly expenses. When Kevin and Sarah arrived at my house an hour later, they both looked like people who were beginning to suspect that everything they believed about their financial situation was wrong. Mom, Kevin said as soon as they walked through my door, I need you to explain what the mortgage company told me. Before I explain anything, I replied, I want to ask you both a question. 3 weeks ago, you told me that I was dead weight costing you $3,000 a month. Can you show me exactly how you calculated that figure? Kevin and Sarah exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with having to justify their accusations. Well, Sarah said, there are the groceries when you eat with us, and the utilities when you stay over, and the help we give you with various expenses. What specific expenses have you helped me with in the past 2 years? Your car payment, Kevin said, and medical bills, and just general living expenses when you've needed help. I walked to my desk and pulled out a folder that contained 2 years' worth of financial records. Kevin, I want you to look at something. I handed him my bank statements for the past 24 months, with the mortgage payments to his lender highlighted in yellow. What am I looking at? Kevin asked, though his face was already changing as he processed what the highlighted entries meant. You're looking at 24 monthly payments of $2,847 each, transferred directly from my retirement account to your mortgage company. You're looking at $68,328 that I've paid toward your mortgage over the past 2 years. The color drained from Kevin's face as he realized the magnitude of what he was seeing. You're also looking at the bank records that prove I've never received a single dollar from you for car payments, medical bills, or any other expenses, because I've never needed financial help from you. Sarah was reading over Kevin's shoulder, her eyes widening as she understood the implications of what she was seeing. But we thought, Sarah started. You thought you were supporting me when I was supporting you. You thought I was costing you $3,000 a month when I was spending nearly $3,000 a month to keep you in your home. Kevin was staring at the bank statements like they were written in a foreign language. Mom, why didn't you tell us? Why did you let us think we were making our own payments? Because I wanted you to maintain your dignity as the provider for your family. I didn't want you to feel like a failure, and I didn't want Sarah to lose respect for your ability to support your household. But we've been treating you like— Kevin's voice trailed off as he realized exactly how they had been treating me. You've been treating me like dead weight. You've been acting like I was a financial burden that you need to eliminate from your budget. You've been planning to get rid of me so you could use the money you thought you were spending on me for your own goals. The full scope of their mistake was beginning to sink in, but the most devastating realization was still to come. Kevin, I said gently, what happens to your mortgage now that I've stopped making the payments? Wait until you see how Kevin and Sarah reacted when they fully understood what they had lost. What do you mean now that you've stopped making the payments? Sarah asked, her voice rising with alarm. I mean that 3 weeks ago, when Kevin told me I was dead weight that was costing your family $3,000 a month, I decided to give you exactly what you asked for. I canceled the automatic payments and stopped being a financial burden on your family. Kevin was frantically flipping through the bank statements, as if hoping to find evidence that the payments had continued. Mom, you canceled the payments? When? The day after you called me dead weight and told me you couldn't afford to support me anymore. I realized you were right. You shouldn't have to carry dead weight. So I removed the weight. But Mom, Sarah said, panic now clear in her voice, if you're not making the payments, and we don't have the money to make them ourselves, What happens to our house? What happens is that you'll face foreclosure proceedings, just like you would have 2 years ago if I hadn't stepped in to help you. The reality of their situation was hitting them like an avalanche. For 2 years, they had been living in a house they couldn't afford, believing they were financially stable, while the woman they called dead weight had been secretly keeping them from losing their home. How much time do we have? Kevin asked. According to your mortgage company, you're already 60 days past due. Most lenders begin foreclosure proceedings after 90 days, so you have about 30 days to either catch up on your payments or make arrangements with your lender. How much would we need to catch up? Well, you'd need to pay the 2 months you're behind, plus the current month, plus late fees and penalties. Probably around $9,000, plus your ongoing monthly payment. Kevin was doing the math in his head, and the result was clearly devastating. Mom, we don't have $9,000. We don't even have the $2,047 for the monthly payment. What about the $3,000 a month you were spending to support me? I asked. Now that I'm no longer a financial burden, that money should be available for your mortgage. The silence that followed was the sound of Kevin and Sarah realizing that the $3,000 they thought they were spending on me had never actually existed. They had been living in a fantasy world where they believed they were financially successful enough to support both their own lifestyle and their struggling mother, when the truth was that they needed their mother's support to maintain their lifestyle. Mom, Kevin said, his voice barely above a whisper, we can't afford this house without your help. I know. We never could afford this house without your help. I know that too. But why didn't you tell us? Why did you let us think we were independent when we weren't? Because I thought you'd be grateful for the help, not resentful of the person providing it. I thought that if I helped you quietly, you'd be able to build your confidence in your income until you really could afford the house on your own. Sarah was crying now, understanding not just the financial disaster they were facing, but the scope of their ingratitude toward the person who had been keeping them afloat. We've been horrible to you, she said. We've been treating you like a burden when you were the only reason we could afford our life. Yes, you have. And now we're going to lose everything because we drove away the person who was supporting us. That's possible. Kevin was staring at me with a mixture of desperation and shame. Mom, is there any way you would consider helping us again? Is there any way we can fix this? Kevin, 3 weeks ago you told me I was dead weight that you couldn't afford to carry anymore. You told me I needed to find a more independent living situation because I was costing you too much money. Now you're asking me to resume the financial support that you didn't even know you were receiving. I was wrong. We were both completely wrong about everything. You were wrong about who was supporting whom. You were wrong about who was the burden and who was the provider. You were wrong about who needed independence and who was already independent. But the most important question was still to be answered. Kevin, if I were to consider helping you again, what would need to change about how you and Sarah treat me? Wait until you see what Kevin and Sarah were willing to promise to avoid losing their home. Mom, Kevin said, his voice breaking with emotion and desperation. We'll do anything. We'll change everything about how we've been treating you. Just please don't let us lose our home. What specifically would you change, Kevin? We'd treat you with the respect you deserve. We'd never again act like you're a burden or a drain on our resources. We'd acknowledge that you're the reason we've been able to live in this house. And Sarah? What would you change? Sarah was wiping tears from her eyes as she answered. I'd stop calculating the cost of everything you do with us. I'd stop acting like your presence is an expense instead of a blessing. I'd start appreciating the sacrifices you've made for our family. These were the right words, but I needed to make sure they understood the full scope of what had happened and what would need to change going forward. Let me make sure I understand the situation correctly, I said. For 2 years, you've been living in a house you couldn't afford, believing you were financially independent, while I secretly paid your mortgage to protect your dignity and your marriage. Yes, Kevin said. During those 2 years, instead of being grateful for the home you were able to live in, you became resentful of what you perceived as my financial dependence on you. Yes, Sarah admitted. You calculated the cost of every meal I shared with you, every night I stayed over, every moment of your time I required, and decided that supporting me was too expensive for your budget. Yes, they both said. And when you'd had enough of what you thought was my financial burden on your family, you called me dead weight and told me you couldn't afford to carry me anymore. Kevin was crying now too. Yes, Mom. And we were wrong about everything. So now, when you've discovered that I was the one carrying you, and that losing my support means losing your home, you want me to resume making your mortgage payments so you can continue living in a house you can't afford. We want more than that, Kevin said. We want to make this right. We want to apologize for how we've treated you, and we want to find a way to build a relationship based on honesty and gratitude instead of assumptions and resentment. This was more than I had expected to hear from Kevin, but I needed to be sure he understood what honesty and gratitude would require. Kevin, if I agree to help you again, there can't be any more pretending that you're financially independent. You'll need to acknowledge that your lifestyle depends on my support, and you'll need to be grateful for that support instead of resentful of my presence. We understand. Sarah, if I resume making your mortgage payments, you'll need to stop treating me like a guest who's overstaying her welcome. You'll need to start treating me like a family member who's making your comfortable life possible. I understand, and I promise to do better. And both of you need to understand that if you ever again call me dead weight or make me feel like a burden, I will immediately stop all financial support and let you face the consequences of your actual financial situation. We understand, they both said. But there was one more condition that I needed them to accept before I would consider resuming their support. There's something else, I said. If I'm going to help you again, I want complete transparency about your finances. I want to see your budget, your income, your expenses, and your plans for eventually becoming actually independent. You want to see our financial records? Sarah asked. I want to understand exactly what I'm supporting and why. I want to know how much of your lifestyle is sustainable and how much depends on my contributions. I want to know what you're doing to work toward actual independence versus just enjoying the independence I'm providing for you. Kevin nodded. That's fair. We should have been honest with you from the beginning. And I want a written agreement about the terms of my support. I want it clearly documented that I'm making your mortgage payments, what my expectations are for your behavior, and what will happen if you don't meet those expectations. You want a contract? Sarah asked. I want accountability. I want to make sure we all understand what this relationship is and what everyone's responsibilities are within it. The truth was, I was already leaning toward helping them again, not because I enjoyed their desperation, but because I loved Kevin and didn't want to see him lose his home. But I also needed them to understand that accepting help requires gratitude, respect, and honesty rather than entitlement, resentment, and false assumption. Mom, Kevin said, if you're willing to help us save our house, we'll agree any conditions you want to set. Any conditions? Any reasonable conditions that help us build a better relationship and show you the respect you deserve. But there was one final surprise that Kevin and Sarah weren't expecting. Wait until you see what my reasonable conditions actually required them to do. Before I tell you my decision about resuming your mortgage payments, I said, I want to share something with you that might change your perspective on this entire situation. Kevin and Sarah both looked at me with expressions of concern, probably wondering what additional revelation could make their situation even more complicated. The reason I was able to make your mortgage payments for 24 months isn't because I'm financially friendly and dependent on your charity as you assumed. It's because I'm financially secure and independent in ways you've never understood. I walked back to my desk and pulled out another folder, this one containing documentation of my retirement investments, my savings accounts, and my overall financial portfolio. Kevin, you and Sarah had been worried about the $3,000 a month you thought you were spending to support me. What you don't know is that I have enough money in my retirement accounts to continue making your mortgage payments for the next 15 years without affecting my own financial security. Kevin's eyes widened as he looked at the investment statements I handed him. Mom, these accounts, you have over $800,000 in retirement savings. I have enough money to be completely independent, Kevin. I don't need your support, your charity, or your tolerance. When I helped you with your mortgage, it wasn't because I needed a place to live or because I couldn't afford my own expenses. It was because I wanted to help my son achieve the homeownership dream that his income couldn't actually support. Sarah was looking at the financial statements with amazement. Betty, why didn't you tell us you were financially secure? Why did you let us think you needed our help? Because I wanted to understand how you would treat me if you thought I was vulnerable and dependent on your generosity. I wanted to see what kind of people you really were when you thought you had power over someone who needed your help. The implications of this revelation were staggering. Kevin and Sarah had failed a test of character that they didn't even know they were taking. Mom, Kevin said slowly, are you saying that you let us treat you badly on purpose? I'm saying that I gave you the opportunity to show kindness and gratitude to someone you thought was less fortunate than you. Instead, you showed resentment and entitlement. You complained about supporting someone who was actually supporting you. So what happens now? Sarah asked. Now you get to choose what kind of people you want to be going forward. Do you want to be the kind of people who are grateful for help and kind to family members who make sacrifices for you? Or do you want to be the kind of people who call their benefactors dead weight and complain about the cost of generosity? We want to be better, Kevin said. We want to be grateful and kind and worthy of the help you've given us. Then here are my conditions for resuming your mortgage payments. I handed them a document that my lawyer had prepared, outlining the terms of our new arrangement. First, you'll acknowledge in writing that I'm making your mortgage payments and that your housing security depends on my continued support. Second, you'll treat me with the respect and gratitude appropriate for someone who's making your comfortable lifestyle possible. Third, you'll work with a financial counselor to develop a realistic plan for eventually affording your own mortgage papers, and you'll provide me with quarterly reports on your progress toward that goal. Fourth, you'll perform 20 hours of community service each month, helping elderly people who actually are struggling financially, so you can understand the difference between real need and imaginary burden. And fifth, if you ever again call me dead weight or treat me like a financial burden, I will immediately stop all support and you'll face foreclosure within 90 days. Kevin was reading through the document with growing understanding of how serious I was about changing the dynamic of our relationship. These conditions are completely fair, he said. We agree to all of them. Sarah? I agree too. And Betty, I want you to know how sorry I am for the way we've treated you. We were ungrateful and cruel to someone who was sacrificing to help us. What you were, I said, was human. You made the mistake of assuming that generosity equals weakness and that accepting help makes you superior to the person providing it. But you're not the first people to make that mistake, and you won't be the last. 6 months later, Kevin and Sarah had not only honored every condition of our agreement, but they had transformed into the kind of people I had always hoped they could become. Their community service work with elderly people had taught them empathy and perspective about real financial struggle. Their financial counseling sessions had shown them how to budget, save, and work toward actual independence. Their quarterly reports demonstrated genuine progress toward being able to afford their own mortgage payment. Most importantly, their daily interactions with me had become characterized by genuine gratitude, respect, and appreciation for the support I was providing. Mom, Kevin said during one of our regular dinners together, I want you to know that this experience taught me something important about family and gratitude. What did you learn? I learned that calling someone dead weight says more about your character than it does about their value. I learned that taking help for granted is one of the worst forms of ingratitude. And I learned that the people who support us deserve our respect, not our resentment. Sarah nodded in agreement. I learned that financial independence isn't about how much money you make. It's about understanding where your security actually comes from and being grateful to the people who provide it. But the most meaningful moment came when Kevin handed me a check for $2,800, his first actual mortgage payment made with his own money after receiving a promotion and a significant raise. Mom, he said, I don't want you to stop helping us because we need to learn to be independent. I want you to stop helping us because we've finally become worthy of the help you've already given us. The check represented more than just money. It represented Kevin's transformation from someone who took support for granted into someone who understood the value of both giving and receiving help with dignity. And that, my dear listeners, is how being called dead weight by my own son became the catalyst for teaching him the most important lesson about gratitude, respect, and the true meaning of family support. Kevin learned that dead weight isn't someone who receives help, it's someone who accepts help without gratitude, who takes support for granted, and who resents the people making their life possible. He learned that the heaviest burden in any family isn't the person who needs support, it's the person who provides support and receives only complaints and criticism in return. Most importantly, he learned that calling someone dead weight doesn't eliminate your problems. It eliminates the person who was solving your problems without you even knowing it. The mortgage payments that Kevin thought he was making himself became the foundation for teaching him about honesty, humility, and a difference between real independence and imaginary self-sufficiency. If my story teaches you anything, I hope it's this. Never take for granted the people who support you. Never assume you understand someone else's financial situation. And never call someone dead weight unless you're prepared to carry the actual weight of your own responsibility. The son who called me dead weight learned that the real dead weight in our family was his own ingratitude, intolerance, and failure to appreciate the sacrifices being made for his benefit. I have more stories about family, respect, gratitude, and the surprising ways that financial independence can be both real and imaginary depending on your perspective. So pull up a chair, appreciate the people who support you, and remember to subscribe to Grandma True Stories, because the most expensive lessons are often about learning to value what you already have before you lose it. The dead weight my son wanted to eliminate turned out to be the foundation holding up his entire life,